Hello and welcome to another episode of the PodGhast, where we at Ghastly Tales discuss all things horror. And on tonight's show, I am joined by my good friend Martin Yates.
Hello.
Martin, I want to take you back. Not to the future.
Behind the bike sheds.
Yeah, not again. I want to take you back to 1982.
I wasn't born in 1982.
Fuck you.
When were you born, Michael?
I was born in 1980. I don't remember this film, but
Old Michael Whitehouse. Go on.
But we're going to talk about the Creepshow franchise. And the original film was released in 1982. It was directed by George Romero of Dawn of the Dead fame, and it was written by Stephen King. And it's an anthology horror film, so it has a wraparound story which contains several smaller stories, and the setup is a young boy who's been banished to his room reading a comic book with all of these grim stories, and we get to see those stories played out, much like Tales from the Crypt and that sort of thing.
He actually doesn't read the stories. The
because it's put in the bin,
thrown in
isn't
the bin, thrown in the trash can by his dad, who is horrified and offended by the terrifying tales his son is reading, which I think sort of reflects back on the fact that in the 1950s there was a huge moral furore about these horror comics, which Creepshow was,
which like George Romero
off.
and Stephen King lived through because they grew up on those comics.
Yeah, exactly. And I think both of them were heavily influenced by it. So in a way, the whole movie is like a love letter to those comics. Yeah, to EC Comics. I don't know what the EC stands for. We could probably look that up.
Do you know what? I should know this because I'm currently reading through. For my birthday there, I got the first volume of Tales from the Crypt stories.
Yeah.
And it went into the history of EC, so I should know this. But I don't, Martin. I don't know.
I would imagine the C stands for comics, and it may well be a tautology.
Is it not
EC
something ridiculous like educational comics or something
really?
like that? Yeah, because they started off with like it was like Christian sort of comics they started off making.
Well, I guess that sort of makes sense because a lot of the stories have quite a kind of moralistic plot where someone does something bad and gets their just desserts for it. But it is actually entertaining comics, apparently.
Right, that's where the name Just Desserts comes from, doesn't it? It comes from a Tales from the Crypt story. But in any case,
really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's where it comes from. But so Creepshow, when I was a kid, Creepshow was like one of my favourite films. It was like a horror film you were allowed to watch, even though when I think about that now, that wouldn't happen. Like kids who were like 6 or 7 would not be allowed to watch it.
I don't know. It is a really funny one because it is quite explicit. It's quite violent. Obviously, there's a lot of gore in it, and there's a lot of blood. Not excessively, but there is quite. I mean, it's very theatrical. It's very grand guignol, if that's how you pronounce that. I don't know. I've only ever seen it written down and never said it, so I probably made a total tit myself. But it's very over the top, theatrical, and campy. But it does show a lot of blood and mutilation and sort of gruesome things, necks breaking and people getting bitten and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, it has that, and it has quite a bit of swearing in it as well.
Yeah, it does, but it does all feel very much comic based. And
that's what I was going to say. There's something kind of cozy about it. It never really goes off into the realm of being gratuitous, and it because it's based on these comics which were aimed at kids. I don't think the film was aimed at kids, but the comics certainly were. It takes a lot of that atmosphere and that vibe on board, and I think that comes across. It's almost like a grown-ups version of Goosebumps or something like that.
Yeah, well, probably. But like, I think the thing with Creepshow for me is that it has the comic book aesthetic, like you say. There's something cozy about it, but there's like a delight in the gore. There's a delight in the creepy stories.
It's humorous. It's not completely like nihilistic. It's got a winking sort of humorous vibe to it. It's scary, but not terribly scary. I mean, it's not going to give kids. A strong-willed child is not going to get nightmares from it, so I can see why it almost is a film that's just on the cusp of what you might let a child watch. In fact, I think I used to watch it when my younger siblings were quite a bit younger. Well, they've always been quite a bit younger than me. They always will be quite a bit younger than me, but I'm peaking slightly. Hold on, let me just turn my mic volume down slightly. I think I saw it when my younger siblings probably about 8 to 10, and they watched it with me, and I think my mum was there as well. And yeah, it was that kind of thing where it's like there's a few points where if it continued in that vein, it would become, oh no, this isn't suitable, go to bed. But it hits you with these things and then moves on. You know, not to get too much into the details of the shocks and the.
Where I first saw it was my dad used to. We used to just go into the video shop, and me and my friends would literally say to my dad, like, "We want that one," and he would just go and get us it. And it was a film that just always stuck with me. I think it's the first film that I can remember watching that was an anthology horror film where it had a bunch of different smaller stories. But we should say at this point, I think we are just going to get into spoilers. So if you haven't watched it, go and watch it and then listen, because we're going to go through the different stories that are in the first movie, and then we'll move on to the second one as we go.
And the third.
Oh God, do we have to?
Yeah, go on then. Come on, it's a relevant counterpoint.
So we've mentioned that the setup for Creepshow is this boy who gets banished to his room for reading these this Creepshow comic that has all these gruesome stories in it. The father is overbearing, and he throws the comic out. And when the boy goes to his bed, he's sort of like, I hate my dad and all this sort of thing. And the horror host, which was a common thing in those sorts of comics, actually appears at the window, and who's called the Creep, I believe.
Not the Ghast.
Not the Ghast, no. The Creep. And I believe they may be related. And the first story that we see in the comic book...
Are you saying that the Creep was inspired by the Ghast? Is that what you're suggesting here?
No, the other way about, probably. So the first story is called Father's Day, that we see through the sort of comic book that's in the trash. And it's about a family get together in this kind of standalone mansion where there is nearby there's a cemetery, and one of the members of this family goes there to it's on Father's Day to kind of memorialize.
It's a yearly tradition.
Yeah, memorialize her dad who died 10 years previous on Father's Day. And of course we find out that she actually killed him, and he comes back from the grave because he wants his cake, Martin.
Was that a setup to me doing an impression, or?
I want my cake. Sorry, that's a rubbish impression.
I want my cake.
I want my cake. He's now from the West Country.
It's all
Father's
right.
Day.
We'll put a wee filter on your voice and you'll sound fine.
Splendid. So what did you think of the first story?
The first story, I like it because I mean, I like it probably more because it is the lead-in story to Creepshow, and I love Creepshow. It's not the strongest story in the film, I don't think, but in a lot of ways, I guess it is the most sort of archetypal. It's a monster someone comes back from the dead to get revenge, and there's some kind of ghoulishly humorous handle to it. In this case, the cake, and a bunch of people get picked off, and I think that although it's really not very original, and I guess the film isn't in general that original, that's sort of the point. It really sets up what the tone for everything that follows, if you know what I mean.
Do you remember? When's the last time you watched Creepshow?
Probably maybe about a year ago.
What do you think about Ed Harris's dancing?
Do you know I found that song on YouTube. That song is,
really?
I don't know. It's I'm not quite sure whether it's supposed to be funny or not.
I don't think so. I think that's so anchored in the time. Ed Harris starts dancing at one point, and funnily enough,
I think it is. I think he's trying to do a kind of a satirical take on, like, you know, the John Travolta thing.
Yeah. You think so, or does it just play that way, or is that actually how
is
Ed
that
Harris
just how
dances?
everyone danced in those days? Well, that's how I dance now. That's why I don't dance. But I don't know. Like, I think it probably was a joke because the kind of older female character, I forget her name, sort of comes in and tells them off for being stupid and switches the music off. So I think it is a kind of supposed to be funny, but I know what you mean. It's like somebody's uncle dancing at a wedding.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah,
That's exactly what it is. I was just thinking there though that the bit that really got me, because as much as Creepshow was kind of played for laughs, the bit that really got me was the tombstone moving slowly forward.
That's such a kind of a tense moment, isn't it?
But it always really. I used to play through. I don't know if you did this when I was a kid, and I would watch horror films. I would play through in my head how I would get out of that situation.
Yeah, I still do that now.
And that was one that always struggled. I always struggled with. I don't know why, because I was always I felt like the faster I moved, the faster it would just get pushed off.
Yeah, you don't know if he's just toying with them or not. So basically, what happens is Ed Harris is, if you haven't seen it and you've just ignored our warnings and you've just continued to listen to the PodGhast, and you want us to spoil it for you, what happens is Ed Harris falls into the open grave from which the dead father has risen. In the grave he finds the dead body of the daughter who's been strangled, the sort of elderly daughter who's been strangled.
Bedelia, I think that was her name.
Bedelia, yeah, Aunt Bedelia, played by a famous character actress whose name now escapes me.
She's not that famous.
Yeah. So what happens is he then looks up out the grave and he sees the living corpse, the sort of skeletal monstrosity standing at the end of the grave. He then holds up his hands in a sort of telepathic kind of sort of telekinetic power comes out and starts pulling the gravestone towards himself, which means it's about, the whole thing's about to collapse in on Ed Harris's head. So there's this really tense moment, Ed Harris trying to climb out of the grave while this thing's coming in on top of him, and then he sort of freezes out of fear and he thinks, if I don't move anymore it'll stop falling, and then of course it falls anyway. But one thing that always really struck me about that was how effective that death scene is, even though you don't really see what happened, just from the sound effects.
Yeah, it's really
and the sense of weight of that stone slowly working its way forward. It is probably it's one of the cleanest in terms of on-screen blood in the film, but it's probably one of the most cringy death scenes in the whole movie.
It also has one of the best conclusions to some stories. I agree with you, it's not necessarily the strongest, but it has the joke at the end, which is that he kept, when the father was killed, it was because he was shouting that he wanted his cake, and
that wasn't a euphemism. He
wanted his cake, and Bedelia was working on it, and she ended up just whacking him across the head because he was just unbearable.
Not with a cake.
No, not with a cake.
It wasn't like the Chuckle Brothers or something.
no, our bacon wasn't that bad. And when he gets struck, he comes back and he's looking for his cake, and he comes out with it, and it's got the head of, I don't think it's Bedelia. It's the sister.
It's what's her name again? I forget. Yeah, it's the kind of the woman that tells Ed Harris to stop dancing. He stabs her. He basically grabs her head and then like twists it right around like an owl's head, you know.
Yeah. But where did he get the icing and the candles?
He was in the kitchen.
But that's the bit that gets me as an adult.
He was in the kitchen when he did it. It happened in the kitchen. So
when I think about it, though, I think of this rotten corpse searching through the pantry.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know, it sort of fits the Creepshow. That image kind of fits the Creepshow.
They should have filmed that,
doesn't it? Yeah, fuck's sake, we've moved everything.
I know. So I think we'll move on to the next one now. Do you remember this one? Do you want to synopsize this one?
Yeah. So the next one actually stars Stephen King.
Yep. In
an acting role. I say acting. He plays this comic.
Well, I think it is acting. He's not actually like that character in real life.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, acting includes like Laurence Olivier and stuff, and it also includes Stephen King playing a redneck in the most ridiculous, unsubtle, over the top kind of fashion imaginable. I kind of like it, but I can see that it would put a lot of people off because it's difficult. It's one of those things, you know, and you know, some people just don't get satire. You know, someone posts a sarcastic comment on Facebook and people get all upset about it. Well, it's the sort of thing that those people would look at and go, this film's terrible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they don't get the fact that, he is intentionally playing it in a really over-the-top, ridiculous fashion. I think he
said that, like, Romero told him, just keep going, like, make it sillier and sillier. And I'm sure I heard somewhere that he was a wee bit not annoyed, but he can't watch it because he just thinks it's too much. Stephen King.
It's the sort of thing where if I'd done it or you'd done it, we'd probably feel the same, but other people would still quite enjoy it. Yeah. Maybe, I don't know.
I like it.
I like it as well, but it's the sort of thing where if you're showing the film to somebody for the first time, you don't really know how they're going to react to it because it is so over the top and the jokes aren't explicitly telegraphed as jokes. So when he's acting like a complete buffoon, there is almost that thing in the back of your mind where like you're thinking, is this a children's film? You know what I mean? It is a little bit. I don't want to keep referring to the Chuckle Brothers throughout this, but it has a bit of that sort of Saturday morning.
He is very much like a child.
Yeah, he's a childish character. Anyway, this guy is living on his own in the middle of nowhere, and a meteor falls from the sky and crashes in his yard. So he goes out to investigate, and he tries to pick up the meteor. And all through it, he's a dreamer. He keeps having these dreams of like how he's going to get rich. And he dreams that he's going to take this meteor to the science department. And obviously, the science department at the university is imagined from the point of view of how a redneck would imagine it. With a crazy professor sitting there, sort of giving him $500 for finding a lump of rock. And then he, in the process of taking it out of the crater, it breaks in half, and this kind of blue sparkling liquid pours out everywhere. He gets it on his hands.
Meteor shit.
He gets it all over his hands, and oh man, I totally peaked there. Sorry, I mean, in terms of audio, I didn't actually.
Martin has just peaked in his life.
There was a certain sexual connotation there, but anyway, so he gets his stuff in his hands, and what happens is it starts to grow. So clearly, on the meteor, there's some sort of alien organism that has bored its way into his skin, and he starts this green looking sort of plant starts to grow out of his fingers and anything he touches. So over the course of it, again, a lot of it's hallucinogenic and weird, and a lot of it's cuts away to him imagining stuff, and his dead father comes back because he's hallucinating because his body's been overtaken by this kind of plant from outer space, which when it grows all over his yard, it kind of looks a little bit should we say like marijuana.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a deliberate thing. I would imagine it probably was. And it's although it's really, really unsubtle, I quite like this episode. Between this and the first one, it really sets up that kind of 1950s feel, because you have the supernatural monster in the first episode. They have the skeleton coming back to get revenge, and then you've got the second one, which also almost brings in the science fiction aspect. But it's a really cheesy 1950s B-movie science fiction aesthetic to it, which I really like.
I think the strong thing about this, to me, as much as it is very much a cartoon, more so than any of the others, really.
Yeah.
It's the only part in the film that's actually, I think it's quite sad.
Yeah, it's tragic. Yeah, and that's the thing. I think the other episodes, a lot of what happens to people who deserve it. Whereas, although Jordy Verrill is lazy and a bit of a loser, he doesn't really deserve what happens to him. Yeah, it's there is a bit of pathos to it, I think, which is probably his strong point. And we also probably learn more about him we probably learn more about him as a person, even as a ridiculous cartoonish figure in his episode or his vignette than we learn about any of the other characters who on the surface seem to have more depth to them.
Yeah.
Because we see a lot of the world through his eyes. We cut away to how he imagines and pictures the world. We cut away to when he hallucinates and sees his dead father, and we find out about all his kind of his internal issues and all that kind of stuff. And it's all done in quite a funny way, but I think I guess that's what makes me sort of like him as a character, because if it didn't have that, it would just be completely ridiculous the way he's played and the way he's portrayed in it. But definitely it's probably the saddest episode.
Yeah, I think so. All right, so moving on to the next story. The next story is one which, in fact, the next two stories really traumatized me as a kid, but this one always
We're getting into the core of the film now, because those two. The next two, the one that you're about to start on and the following one, are the longest two episodes by quite a way, I think. And they form probably about 2/3 of the film.
I hadn't actually thought about it that way, but I think that this one is called Something to Tide You Over.
Yeah.
And it's about a man who finds out that his wife is having an affair.
Yeah.
The man is Leslie Nielsen, by the way, which at that time he was already famous for doing the sort of, well, he was just getting into doing the sort of parody stuff. And
but previously he'd done, I think, was Leslie Nielsen not cast in Airplane because he'd actually been in a lot of disaster films and serious roles?
He was a completely sort of straight actor, not in today's vernacular. He was a complete, he played a lot of serious roles. And he was the captain of the ship in Forbidden Planet, for Christ's sake.
Are we just going to keep taking things the wrong way? Oh, he played a role. Did he play a role? A bacon role? Oh.
So anyway, his character finds out that his wife is having an affair, and he decides to punish his wife and the man that she's having an affair with.
Ted Danson.
Who's played by Ted Danson of Cheers
also
fame.
the woman, the wife, is played by Galen Ross from Dawn of the Dead.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, she was Francine in Dawn of the Dead. You don't really recognise her too much because you
don't
really
see her much.
You only see her head. She's buried up to the sand. You only see her in black and white because all her scenes are seen on the TV, except for towards the end where she's covered in makeup.
But the setup anyway is that Leslie Nielsen's character takes Ted Danson at gunpoint. Basically, I know it sounds ridiculous. I don't know the names of the characters.
Leslie Nielsen takes Ted Danson.
It sounds like the start of a bad joke. Leslie Nielsen and Ted Danson walking.
No, it just sounds like Leslie Nielsen takes Ted dancing.
Beautiful. That was lovely, man.
Yeah. So I was trying to sort of make the joke a little bit more subtly, but then you just weren't getting it. And I'm going to just have to hit this over the head.
If you're going to make any subtle jokes, anything using wit or irony, you're just going to have to.
Shall I carry a little horn?
Yeah.
Squeeze it before.
Aye. So he takes Ted Danson to
the Barrel Lansball room.
He takes Ted to this private beach, and he buries the character up to his neck in the sand, and then places a television where Ted Danson can watch what happens to the woman he loves, which is Leslie Nielsen's wife.
She's buried further up the beach.
Yeah, she's buried somewhere else, and he watches as the tide comes in and starts to drown her, and the tide's just coming in faster and faster, and it's about whether Ted Danson can get out or not. He doesn't. He drowns, and Leslie Nielsen is then back in his penthouse, wearing his ridiculous robe with showing his hairy chest and all sorts, fixed himself a wee drink, just giggling to himself, and the drowned dead corpses of his wife and her lover come back to have their revenge and put Leslie Nielsen into the same situation that he put them into. I think it's really effective.
I like it. I think there's a lot that's quite clever about this one. So Ted Danson's character, just subtle things that I really like about it. Like Ted Danson's character is a bodybuilder in this, and he makes a big deal at the start, like how he can bench press so many pounds and all this kind of stuff. But he's completely helpless because Leslie Nielsen just pulls a gun on him and says, "Dig."
Doesn't really look like a bodybuilder, though, does he?
Well, he's wearing about 3 jackets through the whole thing just to hide the fact that he doesn't have big muscles. But he's supposed to be a tough guy, you know. So he buries him, but he's completely helpless. His strength brings him nothing at all because Leslie Nielsen basically has got a gun on him and says, "Dig a hole." So he digs a big hole, and Leslie Nielsen fills it in, and then he's completely immobile up to his neck. And it's such a scary thing. It's such a
that's what I'm talking about. Those scenarios where you, as a kid, you're trying to figure out how to get out of it.
And I think probably. It wouldn't surprise me if George Romero and Stephen King, when they were kids reading EC comics, used to think the same thing as we did, and they've specifically written this in such a way that people watching it are going to go, "Oh my god, don't even know how I'm going to get out of this. How am I going to get out of this situation?" Because they know that's the thing that I think makes the film so good, is that the people who made it they're making it because they like that kind of film. They're exactly the audience. They know what the audience wants and how the audience thinks because they are the audience. And I think a lot of horror films are just made, we'll make a film, what we're going to do. Well, the numbers say that making a horror film is cheap and we get a lot of return for it, so do that. But obviously Creepshow is made by people who really, really love the genre and who enjoy it in the same way as we do, which I think goes a long way. But yeah, it's really tense as the tide's slowly coming in and Ted Danson can't move, and not actually Ted Danson, but...
What always got me about that, though, was that, if I remember rightly, Richard, Leslie Nielsen's character, I think he says that there is a chance you can get out of it as the tide comes in. You've got a split second where it comes into the sand where you might be able to get loose.
I think what he'd said, I think the point was that it was towards the high. Well, the way I took it, maybe you're right, but the point that I took from it was that this was at the highest point of the tide. The tide was only going to be over his head for a very short period of time, for a matter of minutes. And if he could hold his breath, if he could maintain his calm as an athlete, he might be able to hold his breath long enough till the tide receded just enough that he could get his mouth above the water, or his nose above the water. Which, that's what I took from it. Maybe you're right.
Leslie Nielsen, that's the last thing he shouts when he's put in that situation. He's like, I can hold my breath for a long time. So maybe you're right. Maybe he got out. Point.
Maybe in Creepshow 4, Leslie Nielsen will be back. Oh, wait.
Oh, God. That was a sad day when he died, I'll tell you that.
I know.
The day the laughter died. It was a sad, sad day. Can I just say, though,
he's mugging it up with Robin Williams now.
God, what a depressing thought. Not of the two of them. I just mean of the two of them being dead. It's a depressing thought. I'll tell you what though. In this section, the makeup effects are excellent. They're really, really great. In fact, the makeup effects for the whole film are great.
Tom Savini did the makeup effects, and I think it's really Tom Savini's masterpiece, this film, because he had a bit of a budget to work with this time, and I don't think he really had before, and I don't think he really did any many big films since. I know he did Friday the 13th, the first one, and I think maybe the third one, but I don't know, there's something about Creepshow, like there's actually a lot of artistry in it. He's not just creating wounds, you know, like he's not just doing a severed arm, he's creating monsters, he's actually creating animatronic creatures, he's doing things like when the sea zombies come back to get Leslie Nielsen, and Galen Ross's character, the zombie that she's now playing, I don't want to say zombies because they're not really, they're like ghostly revenants. He shoots her in the head, and then like instead of blood coming out, like filthy seawater pours out down her face, and it's such a good shot.
There's a really funny video of the two of them dressed up in the makeup and just like saying ridiculous things to each other.
Oh, was this on like the making of or something?
I can't remember if it's actually in. There is a fantastic making of for Creepshow, by the way. You must see it. But I can't remember if it was in that or if it's just a video that I saw, like a little bit of loose footage that was put out on YouTube. I can't remember, but it's quite funny. Anyway,
did you know that apparently Galen Ross and Ted Danson had an affair after the film?
Listen, I think everyone had an affair with Ted Danson at some point, didn't they?
No, well, that was just a lie. I don't think Galen Ross did, but that's did lots of no. You're trolling me now, right? Fuck it.
Yeah,
not gonna play this.
We can just build up to the worst lie possible.
I'm out my depth. Then we'll just okay, guys. We're gonna plant the most believable lie we can think of somewhere in this podcast.
Don't say that, then there's no point in listening to it. It's not going to be much of a discussion.
They're just going to disbelieve everything.
They're lying to us. I think what we are going to have to say at this point is that we're going to have to just make this episode about Creepshow, and we'll do another episode about Creepshow 2.
Are we running out of time?
We're already at the half-hour mark.
Fucking hell. Well, Creepshow 2 has only got 3 episodes in it, and Creepshow 3... we're not really going to go through episode by episode.
We'll see how we are for time once we finish going through Creepshow. But so anyway, the next one is what I personally think is the best section in the entire movie. So do you want to kick off with this one?
Okay, this episode is called, is it The Crate?
Yeah.
I think it's The Crate. And it's set in a sort of university annex, a little quiet building in the middle. I think it's during the summer, so there's no one around anyway. There's a character who's a professor played by Hal Holbrook, who discovers a crate hidden away in the bowels of the university. And inside the crate is a Yeti-like creature, which has been in hibernation since the early 20th century, which comes back and kills a bunch of people. And then he eventually hatches a plan to use the creature in the crate to off his... not very nice wife, I guess, played by Adrienne Barbeau.
Yeah.
And
the only time I didn't like Adrienne Barbeau.
Yeah, she's in this film and in the I think in this film and Escape from New York, which came out it was shot at the same time. she looks very different as well if you compare her to like in The Fog. She looks like I didn't even realize for years after that they were the same person. Just the way she carries herself and the way the way she holds her face and the way that she just a testament to how good an actress she is, I guess. That she's almost unrecognizable in a way. It also has, who else is in it? Who's the other professor guy? I can't remember. But anyway, there's quite a good cast in this one. And there's a lot to it. A lot of it revolves around Hal Holbrook's fantasies of killing his wife.
Yeah,
which
fantastic.
Sounds terrible, but they're really, really, really fun. They're some of the funniest moments in the film.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doesn't sound like they will be. You know, it sounds like a recipe for domestic violence, but it's absolutely hilarious. You probably couldn't get away with it now, actually.
It's very funny, but I think the mystery surrounding the crate as well.
Yeah.
And have you noticed that when the creature finally shows itself, it's actually just a torso?
Yeah, because the rest of it's
no, the rest of it's not there. It's not there. It's only a torso, arms, and a head. It's very weird if you actually see the full creature design.
But what I mean is like that. It was probably designed in the knowledge that it wasn't going to be coming out the crate.
Yeah.
Excuse me, the crate. So they're not gonna build legs that are never going to get seen. It's like Oscar the Grouch, you know.
But I mean they clearly show you that it's not like you just can't see the legs.
In the film,
it doesn't have legs. You actually see it move at one point, and it's just a torso.
Oh, okay.
It's really strange, because like I always thought that it was just a case of you can't actually see.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, but it's actually that this thing fits inside that crate.
Okay.
And it's actually quite small.
Yeah. Maybe I think it was supposed to be found on an Arctic expedition or something, wasn't it? Yeah. Maybe they cut its legs off to fit in the crate.
I love the idea of
a monster with no legs.
Yes, of relics being left. You know, there's so many things that are undocumented that are in museum archives, and people find stuff like 150 years later on that really alters how people interpret history.
Yeah, like when they relatively recently they rediscovered the colossal squid. I say rediscovered because like it'd been documented like 100 years ago by some guy that had found 2 huge tentacles in a whale's stomach, and they'd been stuck away in a museum like somewhere in an archive, and nobody had ever looked at it again. And for years, all the textbooks said like the giant squid is the biggest squid in the world, and obviously, or the biggest arthropod or whatever, not arthropod, gastropod.
Get it right, man.
One of them anyway, right? He's the biggest cephalopod in the world. But actually, we did know that someone did know that there was a larger one out there, but it was just because it was stuck away in a crate in the back of a museum. Nobody remembered about it until it was rediscovered. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, there's a lot of things out there that have been discovered and are.
I'm not suggesting that there are monsters that can survive.
No, that's exactly
for over 100 years in a crate. But
well, when they rediscovered that squid, the tentacles shot out and grabbed the guy around the neck and pulled him in.
Stop it, man! Stop trying to troll me.
That was the lie.
Oh, that was a lie. Oh, sorry. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So I definitely think this is the most effective segment in the film. It's the best self-contained story. It's got the best characters, best performances.
It is almost a complete film in itself.
Yeah,
it is the longest segment as well.
Yeah, best performances. It's got
best performances.
Yeah, because you've got like how.
No, just because you said about 6 times.
I know,
so.
But you were talking over me. I need this motherfucker can talk. I definitely had the best performances, I think, out of everything there, and also I think that it's also the most gruesome in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that bit where the guy gets bitten by the monster from behind. The monster kind of wraps its teeth around his head, and then pulls away, and it doesn't like bite his head off, but what it does is it sort of bites these big deep furrows into the back of his head and neck, about 3 inches deep, and just lifts off the back of his. He's still kind of mostly intact, but the way it just gouges these huge big teeth marks out of his head, it's absolutely
There's also
grotesque.
A real homoerotic line to the film as well, I think, and I think it's deliberate, between Hal Holbrook's character and I forget the name of the other guy. He was in Reanimator.
No, it wasn't him. He looks like the guy from Reanimator, but it's not him.
Is it not him?
Let me just check that.
Oh yeah, I can hear you. Google this. There's the interactions between those two characters. There's a definite homoerotic vibe going on between them, which adds another layer to the segment, I think.
They say we project our own sort of expectations on films,
Possibly, maybe that's what's going on, Martin.
It was played by Fritz Weaver,
right?
Who he's been in the X-Files.
He does look like that guy, though. I always thought it was the same
Trek,
actor.
85 was Reanimator, wasn't it? Yeah, he wasn't. He was in Twilight Zone. He was in Tales from the Dark Side, the TV show Tales from the Dark Side.
Talk about sure.
But he wasn't. You're wrong.
All right, okay.
He was in Murder, She Wrote. He was in The Love Boat.
Right, all right. I don't need to know his filmography. All I need to know is
Wonder Woman.
I was wrong, and that's what happened.
Kung Fu.
So I think we both feel this is the strongest one. It's
Mission Impossible.
Right, okay. I think they should have ended Creepshow with this one.
You think so?
Yeah, because
is this because you're scared of bugs?
No. It all, even when I was a kid, it felt like that was kind of the big climax because it's the sort of best story. But then the next segment, they're creeping up on you, which I wasn't a big fan of when I was younger, but now I really like it.
It feels very different. It feels different from the rest of the film because the rest of the film, I don't know, like it doesn't have quite the same cozy vibe, just because it's such a horrible character.
And it is about sterility as well in a lot of ways.
Sterile room, yeah, exactly. It's set in a kind of high-rise apartment in New York City, which is inhabited by a character who's clearly based on late-stage Howard Hughes.
Yeah.
He's obsessed with cleanliness. He's obsessed with germs. He's obviously got extreme obsessive-compulsive disorder, in addition to being a really horrible person. So he's the head of this business empire, and we see lots of him going on the phone and like firing people and being a complete dick, basically. Just like shouting and swearing at his employees, and total tosser. A woman phones him now. I'm never quite sure whether there's a causal relationship here, but a woman phones him whose husband has just committed suicide after losing his job with his company. And she's basically cursing him and saying, I hope you die the worst kind of death and all this kind of thing. And then he starts finding cockroaches inside his supposedly bug-proof, germ-proof, sterile
society-proof.
Yeah. So he starts losing it. He starts kind of trying to get the building supervisor to look into it for him. And he makes a lot of quite racist comments to the guy, and he's just generally not very nice. And the more he keeps trying to fight these bugs, and the more he keeps trying to deal with the situation, the worse it gets. He starts finding them in his food. They start crawling out of drains. It just shit gets out of hand.
That's what the segment should have been called. Shit gets out of hand, son.
I know a lot of people that like Creepshow and like horror films that cannot watch that segment. And I think it's one of these things like arachnophobia, which isn't that scary, but freaks a lot of people out who are scared of bugs. These are, I think they're cockroaches, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
And I really, like, my dad couldn't watch it. My dad went from sort of like saying it was kids stuff when he was watching the Jordy Verrill segment. I think he didn't quite get it, to going, this is terrible, I can't watch this, when it came to this segment. So I will warn you, if you've not seen it and you don't like bugs, you could probably skip the last episode. It's also most explicit in terms of language and sexual content as well. He for something that up until this point has been kind of, violence aside, borderline child friendly, he makes a lot of comments like fuck you, you're fired, go and fuck someone, wear a fucking rubber or something like that. What is it he says to some guy?
I can't remember, but
so
I should say it's a fantastic performance by E.G. Marshall, who is a great actor. He was in 12 Angry Men. He was the president of Superman 2.
So he was.
He's a really, really great actor, and it's this one is kind of almost a companion piece to the Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill, because it is kind of like a one-man show in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Although I can't imagine Jordy Verrill and this guy their paths ever crossing.
No,
Can you
no.
imagine two more different characters?
Yeah, yeah. You've got a sympathetic character and someone who's just a horrible, horrible piece of work.
That's something I do like about Creepshow is that although a lot of the stories in some ways are quite similar, they take you through all walks of life and it doesn't just focus on
You go on a real journey,
middle, but
takes us on a journey.
It doesn't just focus on sort of like middle class characters. You've got literally like every segment of society pretty much is covered. You've got like academics to rednecks to upper class sort of landed gentry to self-made millionaires. It covers such a broad sort of spectrum of society and sort of pulls them all apart basically.
And so we should say as well that obviously because it's an anthology horror film and it has that wraparound we talked about, it ends with the boy that's been banished to his room. He's actually ordered a voodoo doll from the Creepshow magazine, and
so this is a reference to the back in the 50s. In fact, you know what? When I was a kid as well, they used to have this sort of stuff in comic books.
X-ray glasses.
In the comic books, they would have adverts aimed at children, and it would always be like little sort of commercial sections, and they would all be like bullshit. It would all be like smoke bombs and catapults and you say X-ray glasses that didn't work.
I'm sure there was a Viz comic about a kid who bought one of those toys, and the toy as advertised was a sponge dinosaur that when you put in water it would get much bigger. Yeah. And in the advertisement it showed you the boy like putting the dinosaur into the water, and it became like a life-size dinosaur. and then it cut to the boy who'd actually really bought it, and he was trying to like get his own back on these bullies, and like has a wee dish of water and he just basically goes, you're all getting it now, and then like soaks the dinosaur, and it just basically slightly puffs up.
Well, that comes around to Creepshow 2 quite nicely for when we do.
We probably should just kick on and do Creepshow 2.
Hold that thought for a little bit, because that actually ties in quite well with Creepshow 2. But before we move on, one thing we've not really touched upon is the cinematography and the atmosphere and the something very, very unique about Creepshow 1, especially.
Yeah.
The way it's shot. Now, they didn't just go, this is based on comics, just here's a film. They actually did something that in a way kind of preempts things like Sin City, although obviously Sin City has had all the technology to actually make it look physically like a comic book. They had all the digital effects and stuff to do that. But with Creepshow, they really, the film does look like a comic strip. The transitions between scenes and transitions between episodes, like they look like they're turning the page of a book. Everything, like every so often, like at the end of a dramatic scene, everyone will suddenly become a pencil drawing, and you'll zoom out of the panel in which that scene occurred, and you'll see the speech bubbles of the dialogue that the characters have just said, and it will move along to the next panel.
We should say that's not how every story just concludes, and then everyone became a pencil model.
Well, it is basically like, but it's really, really well done.
Yeah.
And there's like scenes where like people are attacked by monsters, and suddenly the background will disappear and become like a trippy sort of psychedelic sort of background image, and speech bubbles will appear, and it's just so well done. And all that was done without so much as a single computer. That they weren't able to do it. It was all done optically, with gelled lights and all that kind of thing. It has such a kind of unique, quaint, sort of cozy feel to it. I love it. It really does feel like sitting down, like cuddling up in bed with a comic book that's maybe just a little bit too old for you. It has that feel. I think it's so well done. And none of the subsequent films ever came close.
No, but they tried.
Touching that. Well, not hard enough.
But yeah, that's true. Well, before we move on to Creepshow 2, so the last story bookends the film where the boy orders a voodoo doll and then starts poking pins into it, and his dad starts to feel the pain from that voodoo doll. And funnily enough, Was it not Stephen King's son? Was it not Joe
Yes,
Hill?
it was. It was Joe Hill, who's now an accomplished author in his own right.
Absolutely. But it's good. I'm trying to remember Tom Atkins.
Yeah, who's in everything in this period.
He's fantastic and that role as the father. Which is quite interesting because he's normally quite a likable guy.
Yeah, he's a complete dick in this.
Yeah.
He's an authoritarian, hypocritical, kind of beer drinking, angry American dad. I didn't mean that in an anti-American way, but that kind of that sort of like middle class sort of feels he's been hard done by, treats his kid poorly, talks down to his wife. Just not a horrible man, but just a bit of a tosser. I
like it when the kid points out to him that he has like loads of dirty magazines.
Yeah, when he's like, "Who sells this crap to you? Where do you get this shit?" And he's like, "There's no worse in the magazines you keep in your dresser, the ones under your underwear." And then he smacks him across the face.
I know. But so anyway, I should finish as well before we move on to Creepshow 2 to say the score is amazing.
Yeah, it's all done on. It's all like this little synthesizer theme that they never reused it in any of the sequels.
John Harrison.
Yeah, he did the Day of the Dead soundtrack as well, and not much else. I think he directed some stuff. Did he not direct the Dune TV series?
I'm not sure.
I think he became a director eventually. He was slated also to do the soundtrack to one of the later George Romero films, but then he never ended up doing it. I think it was Survival of the Dead or something. But he's not done he didn't do a huge amount of
yeah, you're right. He directed one of the made-for-TV Dunes.
Yeah, are you on IMDb just now? Yeah?
No, I just clicked on his name there on Wikipedia.
Okay, but yeah,
is that all right?
That's okay. That's all right. We're just supposed to be using our own knowledge here, Mike.
No, but I was just checking that because it was an interesting tidbit. I enjoyed it.
Tidbit.
What did I say?
Tidbit.
What's that? What's a tidbit?
Well, a tidbit is like the kind of cutesy, I don't want to say tit version of titbit. Titbit is the original proper
right, but I can't say tidbit.
No, it sounds stupid.
So anyway, that is Creepshow, a fantastic film, highly recommended, one of my favourite anthology horror movies, and it did spawn a sequel which we will very quickly talk about.
Did you like Creepshow 2, mate?
I did at the time. Actually, I really liked it. I remember watching it, and there was one of the stories in particular, which we'll get to in a minute, that really stuck with me. It is based on Stephen King short stories, as far as I'm aware, but he didn't do the screenplay this time, I don't think.
Yeah, what happened this time was it was like, the first one directed by George Romero, written by Stephen King, which is like a marriage made in heaven, right? Especially at that time. What happened was they brought in a new director, and Stephen King and George Romero were still involved, but they were kind of pushed out a step, if you see what I mean. So Romero was no longer the director. Romero wrote the screenplay instead of Stephen King, and he wrote the screenplay based on Stephen King's stories. So Stephen King didn't actually write the words that the characters said. He didn't actually write the screenplay. Yeah. He just wrote. They just used outlines from Stephen King's stories to make it, and then George Romero wrote it. But then George Romero has never been. I mean, George Romero is fantastic. I love him. He's always. I personally feel a slightly better director than he is a writer. And they brought in Michael Gornick, who was the art director from the first film. I might be wrong, or the assistant director from the first film, to direct it. But weirdly, it loses most of the kind of look and feel of Creepshow. Yeah. Despite the fact that everyone involved was involved in it. It
uses a lot of animation. There's a little bit of animation in the original film. Especially at the beginning, which is a fantastic credit sequence. But for Creepshow 2, they use a lot more of it to try and tell the wraparound story. Yeah. And the wraparound story is basically about a young boy being bullied, isn't it?
It's weird, right? So you've got a wraparound within a wraparound within a wraparound. You've got the story, the little boy coming and getting it. It's supposed to be the same kid from Creepshow, but clearly a different actor. He gets...
Really? Is it supposed to be the same
one?
Yeah,
he's called Billy or whatever his name is. It's got the same name as the kid from the first one anyway. Maybe it's supposed to be him when he's older. I don't know. He goes down to get the newest issue of Creepshow hot off the presses. The Creep is unloading it from the back
it's not
of the van.
the Creep.
But the Creep,
It's not the
Creep
Creep.
doesn't look anything like the Creep in the first one. He's just this old man with a big nose, and it's Tom Savini under makeup. He gets the magazine, and but then when he starts reading the magazine, it then moves into the magazine where the Creep is in a castle,
Right.
like telling the stories. But the animation in these scenes is like, in the first film, the animation was like rotoscoped, proper, like classy, nice animation, like Disney style almost. There's only very short scenes of it, so the budget could obviously stretch to do them really, really well. Whereas in this, there's these extended scenes of the Creep like knocking about this castle and like eating bugs and stuff, and it's really like tacky and stupid. And the animation style is sort of He-Man level, you know?
Yeah, because
really
the difference,
badly looked animation.
The difference between the way they do the wraparound with Creepshow and Creepshow 2 is that there's a lot more involvement in the wraparound, isn't there, after each story?
Yeah, I think that's right. And the story, the boy, instead of buying a voodoo doll, this is what I was coming back to. Instead of buying a voodoo doll to get his own back on his dad, he buys what is it again? It's the Venus flytrap from another advert in the magazine, and uses it to get his own back on bullies, which ties in with that Viz comic you were talking about, where he thinks he's gonna grow a dinosaur to eat the bullies, but obviously in this case, I think
it was in Viz. I just remember it being amazing, hilarious, on the nose.
It sounds like either Viz or The Simpsons, possibly. I'm not sure. No, was it not The Simpsons? I think it might have been The Simpsons. I think it might have been Bart. I think it was.
Do you know what?
Bart
That's
Simpson's
exactly what that was. I'm sure there definitely was a strip. And
does he not throw water on it? It's like
he
throws water on it and then it puffs slightly and then floats down a drain or something. Yeah,
but I'm getting confused. There definitely was something very similar in Viz, but I don't think it was like the whole dinosaur thing.
It's low hanging fruit, Mike. It's an easy joke to make. I think.
Yeah, it was definitely something.
It's an easy good joke to make. So in Creepshow, obviously the Venus flytraps do work. These giant Venus flytraps eat the bullies and all that, which it's all right. The stories in Creepshow 2, I don't think are. I don't know.
The stories themselves could have been good.
A lot better, yeah.
But I think it's just the actual execution. I felt like it was great.
Everyone that was involved, the right people were involved. They were all doing their own jobs. Yeah. George Romero should have been directing. Stephen King should have written the script. Michael Gornick should have been assistant directing or whatever it was he did. They shuffled it around and it just wasn't as good. The first story, it's about these guys that rob a store and kill an old couple, and the old wooden Indian that used to stand outside the store comes to life and goes and gets revenge on him. It sounds like a classic Creepshow story. It just doesn't feel right. I don't know, like it's got this sort of like bright daylit desert setting. Yeah. And they don't do a lot of the comic strip. They don't do the same kind of lighting style. The ending's
quite good when the chief actually turns up and starts executing the guys in the house. There's some good moments in that, and the actual effects for the ending are quite good if I remember rightly.
One thing about the original film is that although a lot of the characters were horrible and they got their comeuppance, there were certain elements to them were, if not likable, at least understandable, whereas the kids that rob the store just massacre the people that run the store. They're just horrible people. There's no kind of tension because you're like, you want them to die, but this old wooden Indian is just an old wooden Indian. He doesn't have much interest to him either, and then it just becomes like this slasher thing with the Indian hunting the family. It's okay, it's not bad. If it wasn't a Creepshow sequel, I'd probably really like it, but it just doesn't quite have that feeling to it. I don't know how you felt about it.
Again, but that kind of sums up the whole film for me, is that the stories all have elements which should really feel, like you say, very Creepshow-esque.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the first one's okay, but I think the second one, which is called The Raft, is the one which at least has a level of tension in it.
Yeah, I think that's the one most people remember. It is a really good story,
and it's about a group of kind of teenage kids or college year kids.
I think they're supposed to be quite kind of well off. So
the college students, and they end up driving down on a sunny day to this kind of secluded lake, and there is a kind of wooden raft in the middle, one of these permanent ones that people can go to and jump off of into the water, and they all swim out there to it, and sit there and drink and do things that young folk do. But then they start one by one being picked off by this.
They notice like it looks like an oil slick in the water.
Yeah, but and they get picked off one by one by this kind of horrid sludge, which seems to be sitting on the top of a part of the lake, and it actually seems to move with intent and try to kill one of them at a time. And the bit that really got me is there's quite you end up with two characters left. It's like the guy and the girl, and she's lying on her side on the raft, and she's asleep, and he starts basically perving her up. He starts feeling her up, and she sort of turns round, and the sludge has seeped up through the cracks.
Yeah.
And like, if I remember right, like, it's been a while since I've seen it, but it's like dissolved half of her face.
It's pretty cool. I mean, description wise, it sounds like something I would love to watch. Sounds right up my alley, but it just never quite.
Especially the bit where the girl was asleep and the guy tried to on with her.
Well, I don't know. Like that's part of what I kind of didn't like a little bit about Creepshow, because it feels just more like an 80s teen horror film. There's no teenagers in Creepshow 1. It's all adults.
Yeah.
There's a kid and there's adults, and that's kind of that fits quite well with the comic strip thing. You've got these people, grown-ups doing grown-up jobs, and you've got the kid who's almost like the kind of imagined audience, and it just feels like I don't know, it's got more dignity to it. Whereas this film, there's a lot of kind of like teenagers, like angsty robbing stores and getting killed, teenagers like shagging on rafts in the middle of lakes, and it just
shagging on sludge.
But it just, having tits and all that in it, it just feels a little bit like it doesn't have that kind of cozy vibe to it that the first Creepshow had. I mean, I can appreciate the female form as well as the next man, but it just didn't feel right in a Creepshow movie. That like we suddenly cut away to a completely like a sort of semi-sex scene, which doesn't really add anything to anything anywhere to the plot.
It has a great ending though, when the student finally gets, he actually outswims the last one that's left. He outswims the sludge, and it's almost kind of Jaws-esque as it's chasing him down, and he gets to the end, and that's a bit that always kind of annoyed me at the same time. I was like, just run. You would keep running, but instead he sits on the land and turns around and is like, I beat you, and then it just rises up and grabs him into the water, doesn't it?
Swallows him and pulls him down. Yeah, that's such a nice shot when it leaps out the water, but unfortunately, for when it's floating around in the water, it just does look like a bin bag, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It looks like a bin bag with like a dead bird stuck to it.
But I would rather have that than if they did that now. It would be a horrible CG thing.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I don't know. I just it doesn't have. It's not shot as nicely as the original. No. It's good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to tear it completely apart. It is a good time, but it was a disappointment to me when I watched it, because I saw Creepshow many years before I saw Creepshow 2.
You don't want to watch them one after the other or close to each other, because while you're watching Creepshow 2, you'll just always be thinking, I wish I was watching Creepshow.
Yeah, exactly. It's close enough to Creepshow to constantly remind you of that better film.
So tell us about the last segment, The Hitchhiker.
The last one has that woman out of that James Bond film, what I can't remember.
That's very descriptive of you.
She's in Moonraker. Anyway, she has been to see Gigolo, and apparently had, was it 9 orgasms or 10 orgasms? I can't remember. But yeah, this is another kind of example of this kind of sexual element that comes in Creepshow 2 that just sort of comes out of nowhere. Anyway, she leaves this gigolo to return to her husband, and in the process of driving home, she realises she's late. She runs over a hobo who asked her for a ride. Did she accidentally run him over, or did she deliberately run him over?
No, I think it's accidental.
It's accidental, but then it becomes a hit and run, because she realises that if she has to tell her husband where she was, then he'd find out that she was, well, not having an affair, but that she was visiting a male prostitute. So she drives off, but then on her way home keeps seeing this hobo everywhere. She go everywhere, and he's holding this sign saying he's looking for a ride, and then he starts sort of appearing at the car.
Thanks for the ride, lady.
Thanks for the ride, lady, and trying to crawl in, and he just he basically just drives her insane.
Does he not get more and more?
She smashes him up in her car, and he gets all like his jaw snaps off and everything. And it's pretty gruesome, and it's kind of cool. But again, like, whereas in the first Creepshow, like the special effect, it was all very artistically done. So like, even though when you had like people who drowned in the water and they came out of the water and their skin was all wrinkly, it was done in a kind of camp style. They weren't trying to make it look realistically like those people had died in that particular way. It was trying to look comic strip with the hitchhiker. Once he gets smashed up with the car, he looks like a road traffic accident victim, which is good in a sense, but he ends up just looking like, you know, like a burger that's been masticated and spat out. It just looks like a mess. You know, it doesn't look cool. It just looks like there's a guy covered in loads and loads of blood.
When I watched this though, for the first time when I was a kid, it did stay with me as a film, but it just, when you watch it now, you just realise, like you say, it's such a missed opportunity if they had all of that talent involved, but just not working in the capacities that they should have been.
Yeah, they were just everyone was just in the wrong job. They had everyone, all the right people in all the wrong places. I think it would just have been so much better if Stephen King, well, at least if George Romero had directed it, I think it would have been a lot better. If Stephen King had written it again, maybe they could have captured, you know, like lightning in a bottle again. I don't know. It just never quite
doesn't have the magic.
Those heights. It doesn't have the magic. It tries to win over a 1980s audience by being a 1980s horror film. Where Creepshow 1 came out in the 1980s, but it was timeless. It didn't really tie itself or have a vibe that belonged to any particular era, whereas Creepshow 2 just feels like a movie of the 1980s. It feels like, let's throw in some tits here, right? We've not had some tits in a while. You know, like, we've not had a sex scene. We've not had, you know, some blood in a little while. Let's throw in a little. It felt like it was made much more to a formula. That's a silly thing to say about Creepshow, but it felt like it was being made to a formula that wasn't a comic strip. It's been made to a formula that was a 1980s horror film. You get the slasher elements. It just didn't have that kind of timeless magic, as you said, that the first film does.
So this was 1987, and then many years later, do we want to talk about this?
Or are you going to go into Creepshow 3?
I was going to say that they made Creepshow 3, which it still amazes me that the people who made this got the rights to make Creepshow 3.
More like Creepshow P.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. Third show. So, but we're not going to go through it because it's really poor. And I tried watching it. I couldn't finish it.
The Creepshow, along with Day of the Dead, was made by a company called Laurel Entertainment. Laurel Entertainment were bought over by, I believe it was bought over by Blockbuster or someone. Anyway, who then gained the rights to the films, or some of the rights to some of their films. What then happened was someone bought the rights from the company that bought the rights, and they just went from one person to the next until this company called Taurus ended up with the rights. I believe Taurus was the company that produced Brave Star, if you remember that.
Yeah, I think
cartoon show from the 80s. I think it was Brave Star, one of those 80s cartoon shows anyway. But they somehow discovered. They somehow discovered that, wait a minute, we've actually got the rights to Day of the Dead and Creepshow. Oh shit, never knew that. So they quickly rushed to capitalise on this. They made a film called Day of the Dead 2 Contagium.
Oh god.
Which the title doesn't even make sense, but because Day of the Dead is already the third part, but anyway, and it's really bad. It has nothing to do with Day of the Dead. It's set on a military base where someone drops a vial of some, like, it was a military base, but it turns into a mental asylum or something, and then it's got like little elements from Reanimate. It's fucking awful. It's really bad. It's like it's made by film made by teenagers. It's really terrible. They also tried to make Creepshow 3 because again they had the Creepshow rights. And Mike, do you want to talk about Creepshow 3?
I can't. I remember. I remember a story about a teenage girl who ended up like being infected with something and spewing everywhere. I think at some point.
Yeah, there's a story also in it where someone like I think a mad scientist invents a remote control that actually works in real life.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of.
That's straight out of like kids' TV.
That's the
isn't it?
John Ritter film, Remote Control.
Yeah. It's fucking.
Well,
There's
what I love.
There's one about a haunted radio.
I was about to say what I love is I'm looking here because I never finished the film. I'm looking here at one
Ghost Dog or something.
One of the stories is called Haunted Dog.
Haunted Dog, yeah. It's beyond terrible.
Maybe one day
it feels very set bound.
Yeah. It just feels cheap.
The actors all act as if they're in a pornographic film.
Yeah, that's what I said earlier on when we briefly mentioned this before we started recording. It feels like
that was me. I said that. I'm taking the credit for this.
I know, it was me. He's taking my points. I said it felt like it was made by porno makers.
Porno makers.
Makers of good quality porn. But you pointed this out to me. I had no idea this existed. There was a very short webisode, a kind of pilot for a web series called Creepshow Raw, which had Michael Madsen in it. We just watched it before we did this, and it was actually pretty good.
Yeah, it's as I said, it's not great. I mean, it's obviously made in a really low budget, and I think that those guys at Taurus still had some hand in it. But it's probably the closest thing in spirit to the original Creepshow since the original Creepshow. They brought back that look and feel, and it's not done as subtly, and it's not
as good.
The budget, and it's not as good, but it's certainly better than Creepshow 3, and it's a little bit better than Creepshow 2, and at least tries to look and feel like the first Creepshow film.
Yeah.
I'd recommend, just as a curiosity, anyone that's interested in Creepshow to seek it out. It is on YouTube. I think it's only on YouTube in like 240p, unfortunately.
But it's still worth watching.
It is still worth watching. And yeah, go and seek it out, because it's a good example of what might have been. You know, I wouldn't have minded someone to have picked it up and just taken it as a web series, because I like Creepshow, and I just want more of the first film. That's all.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want them to change the format. I could sit and watch Creepshow. If Creepshow was 24 hours long, I could sit and watch 24 hours worth of episodes like that.
Yeah,
you know, I could just sit and watch that all day.
It's the first one's great. It's a shame because I think Romero and Stephen King have both said that they felt Creepshow could have been like this really great franchise.
Yeah.
But I don't.
It was quite successful. I believe it was one of Romero's most commercially successful films.
Certainly one of his best.
Number one in the American box office for a couple of weeks, I think, and it did really well. It knocked. Do you know what? Actually, I checked this before I came on air. It knocked, when it first came out. It knocked First Blood, the first Rambo movie, off the number one slot, and it knocked E.T. from 2 to 3 when it came out. So it actually did better.
Can't really say more than that. Now there was Tom Savini is quoted as saying that Tales from the Dark Side, which involved Romero and Stephen King in some capacity, was kind of like the third Creepshow film, or the real Creepshow 3, and it was originally going to be a Creepshow television series. But I think what we'll do is we will do a separate podcast on Tales from the Dark Side.
There's a lot there, because there is a TV series, there's a movie, there's a lot there. What I would say just before we go though is, I mean, could you see them reviving Creepshow?
I'm sure I heard that they were trying to.
I think Taurus sold the rights to Universal, I believe, but there was talk of them doing it, but they never did. But none of the original guys were going to be involved and all of that. But I still think there's. I mean, Romero isn't doing much these days. Stephen King, I'm sure, would be up for it. I mean, it would be so cool. Can you imagine, actually, like, if they did a Creepshow 3 and say they brought back Romero to shoot the wraparound? They could have, like, all these, like, old school horror. They could have John Landis shoot a segment. They could have John Carpenter shoot a segment. They could do, like, something, not like Masters of Horror, do it all in the Creepshow style, but, like, give all these old guys another crack at the bat, and have Stephen King, like, do it all in Stephen King stories.
It would be great.
Release it at Halloween. That'd be fantastic.
It would be great. But I think in general, I mean, they still do make anthology horror films. I mean, a good recent one was Trick or Treat. But I think it is a genre which deserves a wee bit more money put towards it, because often anthology films, especially the last 20 years, are sort of low budget affairs.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, they're not. I think there's the sense in Hollywood that anthology movies are not really commercially successful. So it tends to be low budget filmmakers that do them. People like Ghastly Tales who go out and shoot a bunch of short films and then go, hey, let's slap them together and make an anthology. Which is great. But I think there's a sense that like a studio, if they want a film, they want like a 2-hour long narrative story. They think people don't want to see anthology. I don't know if that's right or not. I mean, I guess the numbers speak for themselves, but there hasn't been a really good attempt.
If it's a decision made by a modern studio, you can just assume that it's wrong. Okay.
But these guys are making these decisions. As much as I might disagree with them, they are making these decisions based on statistics and this film performed in this way. But has there been a real attempt at an anthology horror? Big budget anthology horror within memory?
Trick or Treat certainly felt like it was had a good budget to it. And I think it's a very good anthology film, but we will cover that in an upcoming podcast, because Martin, I have to pee.
Martin has to go to bed.
I have to pee, but I have very much.
I also have to pee. I've been jumping up and down my seat for the past.
Beautiful. I've very much enjoyed going over Creepshow with you, because it should be a great franchise. Certainly the first film is really great, and we thoroughly recommend it to anyone out there who enjoys a good horror film, but also there's a lot of comedy and a lot.
But it's not, I will say, it's not ha ha ha. It's not like kind of jokes, but it's more like a kind of comedy sort of vibe to it. Yeah.
So I think I will go now and do my pee.
Okay, pee long and deep.
I'm just trying to think here if I could actually pee from here into the toilet.
Is there not a bin or something near you?
Oh God, you've opened
like a metal paper can. That kind of sounds that hits the.
You've opened a can of worms. We will be back soon with another horror discussion for another podcast, and all I can say for now is, Martin,
stay scared,
and I'm going to go and pee. Good night. We hope you enjoyed tonight's podcast. If you would like to support the free content the Ghastly Tales team produces, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ghastlytales. And if you have any requests for horror topics you would like us to discuss, you can leave a comment below if you're watching this on YouTube, or send us a message on our Facebook page at facebook.com/ghastlytalespresents. Alternatively, you can email us at ghastlytales@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more original horror stories, narrations, films, and podcasts. Unpleasant dreams.